This week in Washington, the Republicans realized that if they hold out long enough, they can get exactly what they want from President Obama. He has caved once again to the demands of the Republicans, kicking and screaming the whole way about how terrible he is. They get exactly what they asked for. This recent one is about the Bush tax cuts. Back in 2001, the Bush proposed a bunch of tax cuts that basically were going to break our bank. They were going to screw up our economy, and we heard the same rhetoric from the politicians, the GOP politicians, that this would spur economic growth. If you cut taxes, you're going to make more money in revenue because the economy is going to grow so great. It's going to create jobs, all sorts of stuff like that. Same old rhetoric. I've got some of that. I'll play it for you here in just a little bit. One of the things with these tax cuts is they were set to expire. They couldn't get enough support to do this tax cut the regular way and through the House and then the Senate. They couldn't get enough votes because it was going to just destroy the deficit. When Clinton handed the White House over to Bush, there was a surplus in the economy. Now, granted, the Congress has to take some credit for that too. But there was a surplus, and it was driving the Republicans mad because their whole concept is you got to spend all the money you have, create a deficit. That way you can complain about the deficit, and it gives you an excuse to cut the social programs, which they're ideologically opposed to. In their view, welfare, which the whole idea of welfare is not just about non-existent anymore, but food stamp programs, Medicare programs, Medicaid programs, Social Security, VA benefits, all of these things drive them nuts. If it was up to them, the only thing that we'd be funding as a government would be patent protection and a strong military so that we could continue our conquest throughout the world. So these tax cuts were put in for 10 years, and they were set to expire. And that date is coming up on January 1st. So let me just explain something. For the Republicans out there who don't really understand what this means, this is that right there. I don't know if you can read that. I guess you can. That is a coupon. If you read down here, it says offer expires January 2011, January 15th. On the Bush tax cuts, it said offer expires January 1st, 2011. These clowns have been talking like this is some kind of huge tax increase. No, this was a temporary deal that you promised us the world, and it didn't happen. But that's not good enough reason for Obama to say, absolutely not. He's got to compromise. And that's exactly what he's done. Once again, he has compromised and given the Republicans everything they asked for.
In exchange for a temporary extension of the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, we will be able to protect key tax cuts for working families. The Earned Income Tax Credit that helps families climb out of poverty. The Child Tax Credit that makes sure families don't see their taxes jump up to $1,000 for every child. And the American Opportunity Tax Credit that ensures over 8 million students and their families don't suddenly see the cost of college shooting up. These are the tax cuts for some of the folks who've been hit hardest by this recession. And it would be simply unacceptable if their taxes went up while everybody else's stayed the same. Now, under this agreement, unemployment insurance will also be extended for another 13 months, which will be welcome relief for 2 million Americans who are facing the prospect of having this lifeline yanked away from them right in the middle of the holiday season. This agreement would also mean a 2% employee payroll tax cut for workers next year, a tax cut that economists across the political spectrum agree is one of the most powerful things we can do to create jobs and boost economic growth. And we will provide incentives for businesses to invest and create jobs by allowing them to completely write off their investments next year. This is something identified back in September as a way to help American businesses create jobs. And thanks to this compromise, it's finally going to get done. In exchange, the Republicans have asked for more generous treatment of the estate tax than I think is wise or warranted. But we have insisted that that will be temporary.
So let me get this right. The wise thing to do is to give the bully your lunch money in the hopes that he won't be back tomorrow for tomorrow's lunch money. Do you see the problem with this logic? The Republicans have shown time and time again that if you give them what they ask for, they will continue to ask for it. Talk about entitlement mentality. And this is an absolutely crazy idea. Before we agree to extend any tax cuts, I'm not just talking about the tax cuts for the wealthy, I'm talking about any of these tax cuts. Shouldn't we check and make sure that the promises that were made 10 years ago about these tax cuts are applying today? Let's take a look at a couple of things and see the promises that were made by the Republicans at the time that they wanted to institute these tax cuts.
Others say the nation can't afford a tax cut. With each projection, the budget surplus continues to grow. The president has offered a budget that funds education at record levels, protects and strengthens Social Security, pays off the largest amount of debt in world history, and allows vital government programs to grow at or above the rate of inflation. And still, there is a surplus.
What we are trying to accomplish is basically this. You are overpaying your taxes. You ought to get some of your money back. We are protecting Medicare. We are modernizing Medicare. We're protecting Social Security. We're paying down the national debt as fast as we can. And even after doing all of those things, you are still overpaying your taxes.
Surely the president knew that if you cut taxes this much, it was going to increase the deficit and endanger these social programs.
For small businesses, tax relief means more customers and improved cash flow, more money to hire more workers, more money to expand benefits, more money to invest in new technology. Tax relief will create new jobs. Tax relief will generate new wealth. And tax relief will open new opportunities.
The problem here is the president fails to mention that the new prosperity is going to be in India, Mexico, and China. It obviously hasn't been here because we now have twice the unemployment that we had then. Now, the Democrats, they were standing up and jumping up and down and screaming, "This is going to destroy our economy," but nobody wanted to listen.
Mark my words, the President and the Republican leadership have no intention of abiding by a $1.3 trillion tax cut that's contained in their budget. They're going to move things around, there'll be some creative accounting, and they are going to try to fit more than a $3 trillion tax cut into this $1.3 trillion bag. They have no intention of stopping. That's not responsible. It's not what's best for all of America's families. We make it impossible to meet the needs of Social Security and Medicare or to invest in education. We roll the dice on a set of budget projections that aren't just wrong some of the time. These projections are wrong all of the time. This is a recipe for budget deficits, for more debt, less economic growth. It is the wrong plan for America.
Instead of focusing on what we actually have right now, this tax debate has been framed in terms of an unreliable 10-year frame of reference. If the Congressional Budget Office were to figure the surplus now, under the present circumstances in our economy, with California in trouble and the stock market and all the rest, we would have much different things. But basically, the game today is a crapshoot. You'd have better odds rolling these dice than banking on the money being around for education, for defense, for privatizing Social Security, all the things the president says, than you would counting on a 10-year projection. Just roll the dice, folks, and see what comes up. The administration seriously underestimates the size of the surplus we ought to be running in order to meet our needs for Social Security and Medicare.
One of the most frustrating things about this debate is that unemployment benefits are being used as a bargaining chip. 2 million people lost their unemployment as of the first of this month because they were allowed to expire. And the Republicans, they demand that the unemployment benefits be paid for. But these big tax cuts, that's not important. Those don't need to be paid for. Doug Lamborn actually was arrogant enough to put out a statement that says, I'd rather help people find jobs than give them a government handout. Well, I would love to see people start calling his office and asking him for that help that he claims to be offering to help them find jobs. There's actually one opening for every 5.2 unemployed people in this country right now. And the politicians are actually considering allowing unemployment benefits to lapse. What do you tell that person that has to watch while they put their kid to bed hungry? One of the things that keeps coming up is that we got to boost the economy, and that's what these tax cuts are for. But the Congressional Budget Office actually put out a list of things. They compared different ideas and how they affect employment. Now, there's the chart up here at the top, the big blue line that's all the way over the farthest. That's the most effective. And guess what that is? That's increasing aid to the unemployed. Least effective, down here, little tiny bit of blue, right here, little tiny bit of blue. That's tax cuts. So this idea that, this is to boost the economy is just a load of hogwash. Now, in all of this, even though the president is willing to bend over and cave to the stupid demands of the Republicans, there's been one senator that stood out, and I've mentioned him before on the website, but I would just like to wrap up with him discussing this issue. And he's actually talking about standing up and preventing this compromise from happening.
This is the issue. Our Republican friends have got to be held accountable. The issue is the insult, the outrage that they want tax breaks for billionaires, but they can't in their heart come up with extending unemployment compensation so that millions of families in this country will have a modicum of security. That's an outrage. I believe politically we can rally the American people around that cause. We are right. We're talking about social justice. They're talking about more tax breaks for billionaires who don't need it.
This is against the will of the American people. All the polling that's out there. This is against the majority votes in the House. This is against the majority of votes in the Senate. There were 53 votes on the Senate floor on Saturday. Is President Obama playing with the future of his presidency, in your opinion?
Not only is this bad public policy, driving up the deficit, increasing the growing gap between the rich and everybody else, I think it is bad politics. It's bad politics in the sense of who is going to believe the president or anybody who votes for this in the future when you campaign for years against Bush's economic policy and then you say, oh, by the way, that's what I'm voting for. I'm voting for tax breaks for the rich. And by the way, if it turns out in this deal to be 2 years, you can bet that that's just the beginning. It will be extended beyond that. So I think for a Democratic president, Democratic House, Democratic Senate to be following the Bush economic philosophy of tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires is absolutely wrong public policy, absolutely wrong politically. And I got to tell you, I will do whatever I can to see that 60 votes are not acquired to pass this piece of legislation.
Well, there you have it, folks. Obviously, they're not serious about deficit reduction. Bernie Sanders is about our only hope that this crap doesn't pass. So I would hope that there's about 50 more like him, but I'm not encouraged by it. So we're going to extend the same policies that have caused this huge deficit that they're now telling us we got to suck up and face the pain for. That's about all I've got for this week. Until next week, have a good one.